Unity, the game development platform, made a pricing update recently that caused a firestorm in the community. Within hours, thousands of developers and creators had pledged to leave the Unity platform for good. So what is going on? What's the full story? And is this a short-term crisis, or is Unity going to crash and burn? That's what we're going to cover in this video. In case you don't know me, my name is Tim Corey and I make learning C# easier. This channel has hundreds of free videos to help you become a great C# developer. Plus, I offer more free C# resources, a podcast, and paid courses on my website at iamtimcorey.com. So let's dive right into this Unity meltdown. So what happened? Well, on September 12th, and yes, that's only a few days ago compared to when this video is coming out, Unity changed their licensing structure, and it's effective January 1st, 2024. Now, if you do the math on that, there's not many days between when they announced it and when it goes live. So let's talk about this whole licensing thing, and let's get the information right from Unity. So when are the costs incurred? This is an important thing because when people first heard this announcement, they started making assumptions and didn't read things through before they decided to create their hot takes. So be careful here because this is right from Unity. So you'll hear people say something that contradicts this. This is the actual information. If you're on Unity Personal and Unity Plus, the Unity Personal is the free version of Unity, which probably if you're an indie developer, that's what you're using. And they have said that Unity Personal can now be used by anybody. So if you're on Unity Personal, we're going to focus on that mostly because Pro costs $2,000 a year, and Enterprise doesn't even have a price tag you have to call in order to get details on that. That's probably not you. But let's focus on Unity Personal, and you can read the other values if they apply to you. So you have to meet two thresholds in order to even be charged anything, because again, Unity Personal is free. So the first threshold to meet is in the last 12 months, have you made $200,000 on that particular game? And that's important here because if you have 5 different games, they don't add up. So if you make $50,000 on game 1 and $50,000 on game 2 and $50,000 on game 3 and on game 4 and on game 5, you've made $250,000. But you do not qualify to be charged by Unity. It's only if one of those games makes $200,000 in the past 12 months, then only that game could be potentially eligible. Because there's this and. You have to have $200,000 in revenue, and you have to have an install threshold of 200,000 units, meaning your game has to have been installed 200,000 times. So your game has to both have made $200,000 in the last 12 months and have been installed at least 200,000 times. But note, there's a couple things to note here. First of all, I've highlighted it, lifetime. So once your game has been installed 200,000 times, it doesn't matter if that was 3 years ago, it still qualifies or it still meets the install threshold. So then the only thing that it still has to meet is the revenue for the past 12 months. The other thing is install, not purchase. This is not about purchases. This is about installations. So if you purchase a game, let's say you purchase, I don't know, let's pick a game that I love, Portal 2. I have purchased Portal 2. In fact, I've purchased it multiple times, but let's just say I've purchased it once. So I have purchased Portal 2 on Steam. And Portal 2, by the way, is not a Unity game, but we're just using this as an example. So when I purchased Portal 2, it's been years. I bought it when it was new. So it's been, I don't know when it came out, but it's been years ago. So that PC is no longer in existence. In fact, I've had probably 10 PCs or more since then that I've installed it on. Because, like right now, I have a laptop and I have a gaming computer and I have this computer right now that I'm presenting on. This is my work computer. I've installed Portal on my gaming computer, not this work computer, the gaming computer and my laptop. And those are both the most recent one. I've had 2 computers like that for years, and I keep swapping them out. I swap them out more often than even the regular person. But let's just say I've installed it 10 times to be on the low end. Well, if they had made $200,000 in the past 12 months on Portal 2, I'm sure they have. But if they have, well, then my installations, my 10 installations, will all count towards that threshold. So it's not one installation, it's multiple potentially per person. So, and they have verified that yes, they will charge you for each one of those installations, not just the first one. So that's the step one. That's the if you're eligible. Now let's pretend we're eligible for it and talk about the fees. Well, if you are, and my highlight's a little bit off, but if you are in the Unity Personal, it's going to cost you 20 cents per install. It does not matter if you have one installation or a million installations, you're going to charge 20 cents per installation. But here's another thing that people have missed is that's after the 200,000. Now, again, though, remember that that's 200,000 is lifetime. So once you meet that, it doesn't matter if that was 3 years ago, any new installations count as chargeable installations, not just after 200,000 in that year. So 20 cents per install, which means that my first installation of Portal 2, let's say they'd already met all the criteria, would have cost Valve 20 cents. But every time I install it on another machine would cost them another 20 cents. So if I had 10 installs, I would have cost them $2. So that can be significant very quickly. Now, note down below, I did point this out as well because I wanted to make sure it's noted, is that in emerging markets where the income you might get will be lower than, let's say, the normal US dollar that they're charging you in. Well, in those emerging markets, and they have a list, they're 2 cents per install instead of 20 cents per install. So that will make a difference, but just note that's where we're at. That's how much this calculation will cost. Okay, so we're gonna get into kind of doing some math on this because this might sound no big deal. I mean, 20 cents per install, what's the big deal? We're gonna talk about that for a minute. But let's talk about the benefits because there are some additional benefits that come with this new pricing plan. Okay, and this is from Unity. I'm quoting here. All Unity plans will get Unity Sentis, which enables running an AI model in the Unity runtime. Now, you may have heard that Steam will ban games that use AI models. That's not what this is talking about. This is a different thing. This evidently does not negatively impact your game on Steam. The Steam blocking of certain games was about AI-generated art. I don't believe that's what this is. So that's where you should be fine, but you're going to get AI for your game. Cool. Okay. And then if you're on a Unity Personal, you get the Unity Asset Manager free tier, which is 10 gigabytes of storage in the cloud, and a maximum of 3 Unity DevOps seats, featuring 5 gigabytes of storage and 200 Windows build minutes I'm assuming per month. I don't think they specified, but I'm assuming that's what it is. I'm hoping it's not per year. So that's what you get. Now, notice that for Pro and Enterprise, it's about how much storage you get per seat. But the DevOps storage and the build minutes are the same as the free version. You only get 5 gigabytes of storage for DevOps, and you only get 200 Windows build minutes for storage. So unless that means that they're pooled per seat, which I don't think they are, but there's a slight chance they did not word this well. But these are the benefits. They're not huge benefits. They're not great benefits, especially not for the costs. So let's talk through what are some potential places where you might see some costs for your game. So let's just take an ethical free-to-play game. And what's an ethical free-to-play game? Well, it's a game where maybe it's free to download, but then you pay to unlock certain things or pay to unlock the rest of the game or something like that, as opposed to a pay-to-win game, meaning a game where the only way to win is if you pay money. We're going to talk about ethical free-to-play because I think that's where you want to be, right? So let's just say that it's $10 to unlock the rest of the game, okay? So it's free to play, but if you want to unlock the rest of the content, it's $10. And 1 million people download it, all right? So it's free, so a lot of people download it and play it, and if they like it, they'll upgrade. But how many are going to upgrade? We're going to say 2% of people upgrade, okay? This is just a hypothetical scenario, just to kind of show you where things could go wrong. Well, you made $200,000. That's our threshold, right? Where we've met that threshold of the $200,000, but that's before fees. And yes, Unity is going to charge you before any fees. They charge you in the gross, which means that if you're in, let's say, the iOS store or the Android store, where you're getting charged 30%, well, now you're down to that's $140,000 instead of $200,000. Okay, so kind of keep in mind $140,000 instead of $200,000 if you're on a store that charges 30% for distribution. If you're on itch, where maybe itch.io, where you can choose the percentage, you could be down to as little as $0. But let's just we're going to say $200,000 before any fees, before paying yourself, before paying for the assets, anything. So you've made $200,000 in a year. That's great. You've done a great job as an app or a game developer. So what are the Unity fees? Well, you owe Unity $160,000. Now think about that. You made $200,000 gross before the fees. If you paid that 30%, you're down to $140,000 of income, and you owe $160,000 to Unity. Basically, you are now in debt $20,000 to Unity and have made no money. That's what's freaking people out. Now, I'm going to give you a couple examples here. I just pulled some numbers from the internet, and trying to find actual numbers is hard. But I pulled a couple of big things you would know. First one's Clash of Clans. Now, Clash of Clans was not made with Unity, but let's just pretend it was. As of 2019, which is 4 years ago, it had been downloaded 621 million times. They would owe $124 million. That's how much they would owe Unity. $124 million because they built their game in Unity. Now, here's another big name that you might know that was built in Unity, and that's Hearthstone. So from Blizzard, the free-to-play card game Hearthstone, they have, and again, numbers are sketchy, but they have 100 million registered users. Now, that is not installations. For example, I've installed Hearthstone on probably 3 different iPads, my phone, and I'm going to guess at least 5 computers. So that's 9 different installations. Now, if that were to be everybody's scenario, that's 900 million downloads. But let's pretend it's not. Let's pretend only 1 download per person. Well, Hearthstone would owe $19 million to Unity. That's a lot of money to pay for that engine. So That's why people are freaking out. But let's do another scenario. Let's talk about a mobile game. Mobile is hard because typically you don't charge for apps because people just don't want to play. Like, for example, that Clash of Clans. Well, Clash of Clans is free to install. They do make lots of money because of it, and they are pretty ethical for the most part about how they charge for things. Like, you can play the entire game, I have, without paying a dime. And quite frankly, for me, that's kind of my challenge is I don't pay anything because, I like the challenge of it. Now, I have at times given them money, kind of like one-off things, because I felt kind of bad about the fact that I've never given them a dime. But most mobile games can't charge. But let's just say you charge $1 to purchase the game. That's a pretty standard fee for especially a game that's not going to be a top-tier AAA type game. Let's say you make a game and you decide to charge for it. And so you're going to say, you know what? I'm going to have to pay per user, so I'm just going to charge $1 for the game. And 500,000 people purchase it, which is probably unrealistic. There probably won't be that many people that purchase it, but let's just say they did. 500,000 people. If half the people upgrade their phones sometime in whenever, it doesn't matter if it's, tomorrow or 2 years from now. If half the people upgrade their phones, which means a reinstallation of the app, well, then you've made $350,000. That takes into account the 30% store fee. So $350,000 is yours. But you owe $110,000 to Unity. And that's pretty good compared to what it could be. So, and I'm being kind to Unity here because most apps are free, but charge those in-app purchases. And by the way, Unity says those in-app purchases will be counted towards your dollar amount. So that would be greatly increase the number of users while decreasing the income. And here's the thing. I've counted only 750,000 installations, which would be everybody installs it once and half the people install it twice. But what if they have two devices, an iPad and an iPhone, or any kind of Android tablets and an Android phone? Or what if they have family sharing? For example, my family, we have all iPhones. Well, we have family sharing turned on, which means if I buy an app, well, then the rest of my family can install it for free. So if you average 3 installs per purchase, like for example, my family, there's the 4 of us that have family sharing turned on, which means if I purchase something, my wife and my 2 boys can also install it. That happens quite frequently. That'd be 4 people installed it. They install it once. Well, we're going to get a new upgrade to our phones. Our phones are due for an upgrade pretty soon. Well, that would be another installation per person. We could easily be in the 8, 10, 12 range for installations. But let's just say that every person who purchases this, instead of being 1 install or 1.5 installs per person, let's just say we have 3 installs per person. Well, that would mean instead of $110,000 you owe Unity, you're now at $260,000. So you kind of dread every time, if you have a iOS game, you dread every time that Apple came out with a new phone, because you'll be charged 20 cents per user that upgrades their phone that has your game. Well, that's gonna stink, because they're not paying you more money. They're not gonna pay you another $1 for every installation. They're only paying you $1 once. So that $1, which is actually 70 cents yours, well, now you're looking at that going 3.5 installations. That's all I can average to break even. I have to have less than 3.5 installations per user in order to make money. That's a problem. Okay. So this is what's been going on. This is what people saw when they looked at the Unity numbers and said, this doesn't work. So this is what the community response was. I'm going to kind of touch on a few different responses. There's been a ton of outcry, but I don't want to just talk about the sensational outcry, because, the sensational outcry is is going to happen no matter what. We saw that with open source. People who have paid nothing for something have massive outcry if there's any type of even asking for donations. Like, you can't do that. That's what we saw with Mock. The idea of asking for donations, I guess there's more complexity there. I have a whole video on it. But, just asking for that, not saying you have to, asking for it, caused a massive outcry. We're not talking about that type of outcry. And I had not pulled from that type of outcry. I pulled from the people who are actively building in Unity. And so here are just a few of the ones I pulled. So Pixel Playground, they says that it's unsustainable and they decided to discontinue the use of Unity for game development. The Padsoft, the World of Little Legends game, they said that, my first game with Unity will also be my last game with Unity. And then, goodbye Unity. It was fun while it lasted. And Slay the Spire says, we're done. And Kenny says, we're done. And Frog Team says, we're done. So this is just a few. In fact, someone put together a graphic of just these type of announcements, and this is what it looks like. Now, I will point out, if you notice, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows down and 4 over. That one that says Unity on there, that's actually a fan-created one that's not actually a Unity statement. So you can kind of pull that one out. But all the rest of these are actual indie developers and studios and asset pack creators that are saying, you know what? No, we're done. This is either leaving or saying, we're going to leave if you don't roll all this back. So that's significant. It's not that you have just, the keyboard warrior who is outraged over everything and who lives on outrage. We've gotten to this outrage cycle with news where we're like, we kind of don't feel alive. I mean, some people don't feel alive unless they're angry about something. And there's always something angry about. There's always injustice somewhere. And sometimes it feels like people are just looking for injustice. But this isn't that. This is the people who are in the community who invested years and years of their time saying, this isn't okay. I need to leave. I'm not going to stick around for this. That's a big deal. So what did Unity do? I mean, obviously, this is a major problem. So I'm sure that, they did something, right? Well, yes, here's the response. This is from the next day, I believe it was September 13th. They said, well, who's impacted by this? This does not affect more than 90% of our customers. Well, yes, that's true. And here's why. Because if you're an indie developer, I believe it's been a while, but I believe the average Steam game makes $5,000, something like that. So that's not $200,000. So yes, it won't affect a lot of smaller indie developers. But, the dream of every indie developer is to become self-sustaining, to be able to be an indie developer that can survive long-term in the industry and maybe has a hit. Well, what you're doing is now you're rooting against that a little bit. Like you're rooting for $100,000, but if I hit 150, I'm getting nervous. If I hit 175, I'm panicking, and I might even delete my game. Well, that's a problem. Okay, so that's the first statement. Fees on new installs only. Once you meet the 2 install revenue threshold, you only pay the runtime fee on new installations. It's not perpetual. For example, what they're saying is that if you install the game once, they're not going to charge you they're going to charge you that at that point for that installation, but they're not going to charge you for that installation again, ever. Yeah, sure. That understandable, except for the fact that, yes, they're going to charge you for reinstallations and for new computers and stuff like that. Now, that if you look over to the right, you may say, wait, Tim, that's not true. Let's talk about that. So how we, Unity, define and count installs. So only count net new installations on any device, notice any device, starting January 1st. You're not responsible for paying for runtime fees on reinstall charges. We're not going to charge you a fee for reinstalls. Well, wait a minute, Tim, you just said that they're going to charge you for reinstallation. So they have since clarified this, that they aggregate the data, meaning they do not have a way to track individual users. They're saying they have a way to track individual installations without also not being tracking individuals, which doesn't make sense really. But what they're saying is, hey, we aggregate the data in order to not be in violation of, for example, GDPR or other regulations that would limit or restrict tracking by a game engine. So that's going to make that reinstallation hard. They also said that if hardware was changed, if the operating system was changed enough, or if it was a new device, they would charge you again because they have no way of knowing that that's the same machine or same user. Because they're not tracking users, they're tracking machines. Now, this next one, they're not going to charge you for fraudulent installs. This is one of the things that people panicked over. If your application is pirated, well, you'll be getting installs. And yes, Unity will be tracking those installations because they track per installation. They don't figure out if that installation is legit or not. So they said, we're not going to charge you a fee for fraudulent installs. We'll work directly with you on a case where fraud or botnets are suspected of malicious intent. So right there, that's a problem. Because what they said is, hey, we're not going to charge you for fraud installs. But if you suspect there is, we'll work with you to figure out if that's true or not. How would you know? How would they know? If they aggregate the data and they don't know user to machine installation, any kind of connection there, and it's kind of a black box, and they've said it's a black box how we do this. We can't tell you what goes on inside there. So they're just going to give you a number, and you have no way of validating or verifying if that's true. So you'll have no clue if fraud is in there or not. And quite frankly, neither will they. But they're saying, we'll work with you where fraud or botnets are suspected. Well, how would they know? Again, we don't know, and they don't know. They're also not going to charge you for trials, partial play demos, and automation installs. They're not going to count towards your install access. Early access games are not considered demos. Well, here's the thing though. Partial play demos, that means that if it's a demo or a trial that expires and you don't do it, like if you don't, that's going to be considered a different game than the full game. However, if you have a game where if it installs, but it has a limited functionality that you can unlock, that's the same game. Therefore, they will count that. So the only trial or partial play demo that would not count is if it's totally separate from your game. So you have to create a separate demo from your full game, which may sound fine, except for the fact that if you say, you know what, I like this demo, I want to play the full game, it's not just a matter of doing an in-app upgrade now. You have to go back to the store and find the full game and install it. That's called friction. The more friction you put in between a user wanting to buy something and actually being able to buy it, the less purchases you get. It will directly impact negatively your income to put more friction in place. That's what we're talking about here is friction. Web and streaming games. We're not going to count web and streaming game toward your install count either. Fine, I guess. Now, this last one, charity-related installs. The pricing change and install count will not be applied to your charity bundles or initiatives. How do they know? Again, they're aggregating data. How do they know that particular thing was part of a charity bundle? How do they track which ones are charity bundles versus just cost-saving bundles? These are questions they don't have good answers for. Now, they have a further response. In fact, the response came in as I was getting ready to record this, and it says, hey, we've heard you. We apologize for the confusion and the angst the runtime fee policy we announced on Tuesday caused. We're listening, talking to our team members, community, customers, and partners, and we will be making changes to the policy. We will share an update in a couple of days. Thank you for your honest and critical feedback. Boy, if that isn't a PR statement. But even in that PR-laden statement, the confusion and angst, I really hate that statement. I really hate that statement because it's not a statement of contrition. It's not a statement of we did something wrong. It's this bothered you. We apologize for confusing you. We apologize for making you uncertain about the future. This is not this. We realize this was a bad policy. This is more on you as the user rather than on what Unity did. And this, again, is still a PR statement, even in the fact that it's bad. Okay, so let's talk about some questions, and then I'll get into some more information I have around the situation. So question number 1, why didn't someone tell Unity this would be a problem? Well, guess what? They did. In fact, the developers at Unity have been screaming about this ever since they found out. And then the Unity insiders, which are kind of like Microsoft MVPs, they're people who are not paid by Unity. They're just people in the community that use Unity at a high level that Unity has given some, behind the scenes access. And by the way, those Unity insiders are under a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, not since this went out, but way years ago. Like, this is just a normal thing for insiders to have additional information, but be under an NDA. In fact, as a Microsoft MVP, I'm under an NDA from Microsoft about some things they share. Okay, they share stuff with me early, but I can't talk about it until after it goes public. So Unity insiders were alerted to these pricing changes, and they told Unity in no uncertain terms that this was a bad idea. But here's the deal. The Unity insiders were given 24 hours of notice. One day before Unity announced this, they told the insiders. They were not prepared to listen to the insiders. They did not listen to the developers. They did not listen to people inside their own company for weeks at least, and the insiders for a day. They were prepared to put this out knowing this would be a problem. Okay, that's a problem. So people did tell Unity this would be a major problem, and Unity did it anyway. Which again goes back to that previous statement where like, hey, we're listening. They hadn't listened for a long time and did it anyway. Okay, number 2. How can they track installs accurately? Well, I'll give you the answer. They can't. They aggregate data in order to be in compliance with regulations, so they don't know which installations are legitimate. They don't know which installations are for charity things. They don't know which installations are for just, I reinstalled my same machine. For me, again, I may be unique. I don't think I am. I may be unique in how I deal with games, but I don't install every game I own. I have a Steam library that has a lot of games in it. And my Steam library is just one of my libraries of games I actually have. I've had a box of CDs in the closet from when I was younger and had games that came on disc, and now I've kind of try to put those into a digital library. But I don't install every game I own on Steam. But what I'll do is go, you know what? I kind of want to play Civilization. Well, I'll go over to Steam and I'll install whatever version of Civ I have. I have quite a few of them. I think Civ 6 is what I have latest. So I would install Civ 6 and I'd play it for a while, but I don't necessarily keep it on my machine because I've got a lot of games and more games than I have hard drive space, even though I have 2 terabytes of hard drive space. So I might install Civ 6 after I play it for a little while and, I'm done for now. I might install Satisfactory and play that for a while. Well, those installations are probably going to be counted in that tracking system. Now, they say that they have a proprietary black box algorithm for helping them not duplicate count. But they also have said that if you modify things in your computer, like certain hardware pieces or software pieces, or even just get another computer, they're going to double count. They already know that. So how you gotta track installations? They're not. And so they're not going to track it accurately. And so they're going to, give you an estimate, is what it really is going to be. They're going to give you an estimate on how many installations, but yet they're going to bill you based upon their estimate. How would you like to be billed on estimate for, quite frankly, anything? How much are you going to pay for gas for your car? Well, we're going to estimate that you're going to drive 1,000 miles. You're going to get 20 miles a gallon, therefore, and do the math that way. That's not how this works. When I put 10 gallons of gas into my vehicle, then you charge me for 10 gallons. You don't estimate and go, well, we're going to, we'll call it 15. No, I want down to the decimal point of accuracy. Well, why would I want anything less when you're charging me per user, per installation, actually? That you want that to be precise, and they can't give you precise. Okay, number 3. How will they track income? No one knows. They seem to think that they'll be tied into the payment platforms for all transactions around your game. So, if you have your game on Steam, it seems like they're saying that they'll know when a person purchases your game on Steam. But think that through. Let's just say your game is $20. Okay, well, it's a $20 game, but do you always charge people $20? Well, no, you have sales. Maybe it's a $10 for a while. Are they going to count that as a $10 sale? Or are they going to look at the retail price of $20 and just say $20 times 100 sales means $2,000? But maybe you only made $1,000. Like, what's it going to look like? They have not disclosed how that's going to work. And then think of the fact that it's not just Steam. What if you put your game on itch.io? Well, that's a sliding scale of how much you could charge. And people can even give more or less than you say is what you want for this. Like, there's a donation ability. Well, how do you track that? And, how do you track things like iOS and Android and third-party app stores and, sell it on your website? What if you have your own website and you sell it through there, and have, your own just Stripe or Shopify? Or how are you going to track that? How are you going to track your income? We don't know, and it seems like they don't know either, or at least they haven't shared that. So that's kind of sketchy to not know how they're going to track your income. Is it, again, going to be like point number 2, where it's an estimate? That's not okay. You need to be very, very precise if you're tracking it based upon my income. Okay, number 4. Is it a problem if it doesn't affect my game? This is a very legitimate question because not all game types are going to be affected. If you charge $50 for your game or $60 for your game, let's just say $50. If you charge $50 for your game and it's a big game. Let's say it's 50 gigabytes. Well, how many times is the average person going to install and reinstall it? And let's just pretend that every reinstallation is counted separately, but even so, 10 times? So every user is going to cost you $2 instead of 20 cents. So, $2 out of 50, that's not bad. It's a lot of money, but it's not, it's not going to break the bank. It's only 4%. And by the way, Unreal charges 5%. So it's still below Unreal's costs, even if every person installs it 10 times. So if it's not a problem, if it doesn't affect my game? Is it a problem that this new pricing change happened? Well, yes. And here's why. Because even if the tracking is accurate, because again, what if they said that people were installing your app 20 times? Can you dispute that? No, you're at their mercy because it's a black box. They're going to say, yes, that's the number. And if you ask for an audit, they're going to say, we can't give you an audit because it's an aggregate. And so we can't break those numbers out. So, if you ask for any kind of tracking, they're going to say, can't do it. We're just going to say this is the number. So even if the numbers look funky, well, who cares? So that may change that percentage from 2% to 8% of your income. And that's, just having a question mark next to how much you're going to make is a problem. But not only that, even if that wasn't a problem, and even if it's not going to affect your game, this is a problem because Unity has now proven they're willing to change the rules on you retroactively. Now, you may have seen them say, oh, this is not retroactive. This is not going. Yes, it is. And here's why. If a game, let's just say Hearthstone, because that's an actual example. If Hearthstone came out, I don't know what it was, 5 years, 10 years, probably 10 years by now, my goodness. If it came out 10 years ago, okay, so it came out in 2013. If Hearthstone this past year in 2023, if they made $200,000 income, and I can almost guarantee you they have, then on January 1st, 2024, they'll be charged. And if they had the free version of Unity, I'm sure they didn't, but let's just say they had a free version of Unity, they'd be charged 20 cents per installation going forward. So what Unity is saying is we're not going to charge you for last year's installations, but they are going to charge you for 2024's installations, even if the game is 10 years old. So even though when Hearthstone came out, they had no clue these rules would be in effect. And in fact, in the terms and conditions at that time, Unity said whatever terms and conditions were in effect when you released your game, those are the terms and conditions for life. They have since changed that and said, no, never mind. That doesn't apply. The new terms apply to everyone. So yes, it's retroactive. So Unity's proven they're going to change the rules on you retroactively. So what happens when they change the rules again? Okay, so what they're saying is, I've changed the rules. Pray I don't alter them further. That's a problem because maybe right now it's only going to cost you up to 4% of your income. But if they make a different tweak and say, hey, you know what? It's also going to be based upon, different levels. So if your game is making $1 million, we're going to charge you, or maybe if it's based upon how much your game costs. It's 20 cents for up to $20 games, but between $21 and $50, it's going to be $1 per installation. Well, now they've just taken 20% of your income instead of 4% of your income because they decided that they needed to. And if your game is already out, already on Unity, it's not like you can just easily port it. You can't just move it over to something else. That's not how it works. So you're kind of up a creek. That's a problem. So even if it doesn't affect your game right now, yes, this is a problem. Let's talk some other concerning things before we get into some of my thoughts. So number one, I don't know if you know this or not, but back in July, Unity merged with a company called ironSource. So ironSource is an Israeli company. They had been a malware developer. Yes, malware, as in, I believe that Microsoft banned them from things and they, quote unquote, cleaned up their act, but they're a really sketchy company. And that's who they merged with back in July. Now, currently, ironSource was a ad company. And so Unity had been struggling with making their ads make enough income. And so they merged with ironSource, scrapped their own Unity ad system, and used ironSource's algorithms and all the rest in order to make more money with ads. So I believe, this is just my personal belief, I haven't necessarily seen this backed up anywhere, but I believe this merger with ironSource is probably what they have used then to say that black box algorithm to track things, and we're tracking installations and we're tracking money and all the rest. I think that's because of the ironSource algorithms. That's where I think they've got this additional tracking data from. So that's one thing that's concerning. That happened back in July. Now, you know what? Every company wants to make more money, and every company wants to have a good income, and that's fine. And even merging this company, the malware thing is kind of sketchy, but they said they cleaned their act up, and maybe they had. So it was not the end of the world, but it was a red flag. Well, another red flag is Unity's current CEO. So this CEO, and I'm not even sure how to pronounce his last name, but John is the former Electronic Arts CEO. Now, you may have heard of him before because in 2011, and quite frankly, I find this hilarious, but also kind of an insight into this man's thinking. In 2011, he proposed changing or charging Battlefield players $1 to reload their guns. He said, after a 6-hour match, we could charge them $1 to reload their guns because they'd be willing to pay it at that point. That is slimy. But it gets better because in 2022, last year, in a news article, he was quoted as calling gamers effing idiots. That's not great either. Now, he again walked that back into the PR thing about, I need to be better. I need to, listen more. I think that's what he thinks. I think he looks at gamers and game developers as a pile of money to be mined. That's all he sees us as. That's my personal opinion. Now, a week before this announcement, John sold 2,000 shares of Unity stock. And total for 2023, he has sold 50,000 shares of Unity stock. He has not purchased any shares. So he has been on a selling trend, and that trend continued right before he made this announcement, which of course also made the stock drop. And by the way, he's not the only one. Several other Unity board members have sold significant shares of stock leading up to this pricing update. So the president of Growth sold 37,000 shares on September 1st for $1.4 million. And the board director sold 68,000 shares on August 30th for around $2.5 million. So they knew, seemingly based upon their stock trades, they knew this was not going to be popular. It's going to drop the stock, and they sold. Now, that's kind of also, again, slimy. So that's another concerning thing. This is the person at the helm of Unity, and that's the board of Unity. So now, again, not every board member necessarily, and not everybody in leadership is a bad person. But they're being led by people who make decisions that are not friendly to the community and not even friendly to the company. It's more about enriching themselves, is what it seems. So that's another concerning thing. Another concerning thing is the community is leaving. So if you look at Unity and you go to YouTube and you type in Unity, you will find dozens of videos talking about leaving Unity, about how bad Unity is, about how they had decided to walk away from Unity or were angry at Unity. Now, some of that is just anger. Anger happens after a a frustrating thing. And sometimes that anger is short-lived. But if you look at the YouTube channels for large developers, large indie developers, people who are invested in the community, people who have invested a lot into Unity, you will see a similar pattern. They're leaving Unity. So YouTubers, studios, indie devs, asset makers, and more are all saying, no, we're done. That's a problem, because even if the rest of this stuff didn't matter, the more the community leaves, the harder it's going to be to work with Unity. If you can't find an asset in the asset store because half all the good asset makers are gone, and so what you have left is the people who aren't that great, well, now you have less valuable stuff in the asset store. So that's a problem. Another concerning thing, Unity has destroyed their reputation. This is a big deal. There's different ways to damage your reputation. You can do it over time with small things. So for example, the very first point, they merged with Iron Source. That was a ding against their reputation. When they hired their current CEO, that was a ding against their reputation. So there's just small things that are going to add up and create a snowball effect. But then there is another way to destroy your reputation, and that is to do something big. So when you do something massive, that can, in one fell blow, destroy your reputation. There's a saying that says that trust is built in drops, and it's lost in buckets. And right now, it feels like Unity has emptied every single bucket they have of trust. They have just been going around tipping buckets over all over. And it's not just the initial statement, it's their follow-up statements. It's even their statement tonight that, really doesn't address things well and doesn't even approach the community well. So their reputation is badly damaged, if not destroyed. That's a concerning thing, because even if they walk back every change, the question is going to remain, can you trust them? Have they really learned? Or are they just saying what we want them to say and then going to dial up the heat over time rather than doing it all at once? And you know what? If that's going to happen, that's a problem. And with this, our concerning thing is that game developers need to plan years down the road. I heard an analogy recently that was, we've heard it before with Twitter. Okay, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, there was this big outcry and people were saying, oh, I'm going to leave it for Mastodon. And it felt like a lot of those people came back a week later. And there's this big outcry and they're saying, you know what, we're going to leave for Blue Sky. And it felt like they were coming back to Twitter to talk about, and this is not about Twitter, but it felt like a lot of people were coming back to the community of Twitter, even though they said, I'll never come back. Okay, now a lot did leave, but it felt like a lot came back. And it's kind of leaves certain things hollow. Every election, it feels like people say, I'm going to leave the country if, and it never seems to happen. Okay, but that is reactionary things about things that, quite frankly, whether you're on Twitter or not isn't the end of the world. It doesn't matter, really. I mean, it's not going to affect, it probably won't even affect your bottom line for most people. Most people, it will not matter for their income, whether they're on Twitter or not. For game developers, it matters. It matters because this is going to take money out of their pocket. And I am totally for Unity or whatever other engine or system charging for what they do, because they have to make money. That's the whole reason they make these things usually, is to make money. And even in the ones that don't, well, they need to support themselves somehow. So they kind of need to make money still. So I'm okay with making money, but game developers need to plan years down the road. If you think your game is going to take a year to develop, unless you are incredibly disciplined and cut a lot of what you had planned, most likely it's going to be at least double that. So let's just say it's 2 years to develop a game. Some games are 10 plus years of development, but let's just say 2 years. So you have to know that Unity is going to be around and be a good choice for you 2 years from now. But wait, we're not done, because what you are hoping for is that game is successful in some way. And there is the initial, launch of your game and cool, rah, rah, rah. And hopefully, it's got a good launch and you have a good amount of income that comes in initially, but you don't just want that. You don't want just the income from the first month. That will be a significant amount of income, but what you're looking for is a long tail. The idea that your game continues to make money month over month, year over year. Now, as you build, let's just say you build, Fantasy Game 1. It's your first fantasy game called Fantasy Game 1. And it's successful. And so then you decide, I'm going to create some, a DLC for it. And so you create a DLC. Well, that's going to continue to allow that game to continue to make more money because you're going to buy a DLC, but then new people will come in and buy the original game plus the DLC, and it continues that long tail of income from that game. And maybe if you create a sequel to that game, well, that's going to drive sales to the first game as well. So you're hoping for that long tail of income. So let's just say 3 years. That's pretty short, but let's say 3 years. So if you want to make money for 3 years from your game, well, that means now you need to have plans for 5 years for a game. So if you have a game idea and you say, I need to build something, what should I build it in? You need a plan, not just for what Unity or Godot or Unreal is doing now, but what you project they will do 5 years from now. And quite frankly, you should probably be playing for 10 years from now. Now, you don't know. You don't know for certain what's going to happen a decade from now, or even 5 years from now. However, what you need to do is make your best guess. And what is that best guess based upon? Reputation. That's what it's based upon. And so when you look at the community and you look at the different options, you have to look at the reputation of the various engines and say, what is the right choice for me for the next at least 5 years? And you have to say which company has proven themselves to be friendly to the developer or consistent in how they deal with things. And quite frankly, Unity has destroyed their reputation for longevity. And so current games that are, in production or have been released, there's not much you can do about that. But new games, well, you do have to make a choice then. And a lot of developers are saying, for our new game, we're not making it in Unity because they have to project out 5 and 10 years in the future, and they don't see a future with Unity that will be profitable and successful for them. That's a problem. So those are some concerning things. Let's talk now about what my thoughts are. Because really, I've been giving you the information from the community and the information from Unity and a little bit of commentary, but what are my thoughts on this situation? Because this, quite frankly, hits pretty close to home. So let's talk through my thoughts for Unity and this situation. And I want you to hear me out because you can interpret some things from my actions that are not what I'm talking about. So let's talk. First statement, don't panic. I know That's going to put you on edge. Wait, what? This is a bad situation. It absolutely is. It's a bad situation. Unity has done some very bad things, and this is potentially catastrophic. So why wouldn't you panic? Well, just because it's a bad situation doesn't mean you have to make it worse for yourself. And panic almost never serves a good purpose. If your child is playing in the road and a car is coming, you need to move fast and just grab them and dive on the road. That's a little bit panicky. Yes, that's not what we have here. We have some time. Even if you are in the midst of building a Unity game or in the midst of building a Unity course, wonder who that applies to. Don't panic, okay? Don't make a rash decision. Because you know what? Unity may come back and say, we've heard you, and here's the things we're going to do. And you need to be able to listen to that and go, okay, that sounds reasonable, and make a decision. Or listen to that and go, that's not reasonable at all, and make a decision. So panicking will have you make a snap decision that you may regret. So don't panic. It's only been less than a week. Let's give it a little bit of time. Now, the next thing, Unity itself hasn't changed. I know this is mind-blowing. Unity, the actual platform, the engine, it hasn't changed. It's still a great engine. You can still build great games with it. It hasn't changed. What has changed is the company's monetization system. So the actual engine itself is still a great engine. It's a great way to learn game development too. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a minute. But Unity itself hasn't changed. So I want you to keep that in your mind when we talk more. I'm going to get into my conclusions here, but let's talk through some initial thoughts. Number 3, you can still make a fun, profitable indie game in Unity. You still can. There's still ways to do that. And with that, you can create games that work with the new rules. Okay? You can figure out ways to make the new rules work for you. So you can make a fun, profitable indie game. And remember this, most games on Steam make, average of $5,000? You're still well under the $200,000. So you can make a profitable game that makes $100,000. You can make 3 of those and make $300,000 in a year. Okay? So you can still make a fun, profitable game and not hit the threshold, and you can create games that work with the new rules. So, for example, you could create a limited edition game. Did you know that limited edition anything drives sales up? Because when it's open-ended, people tend to think, well, I'll think about it. I'll put it on a wish list. I'll consider it. Maybe when it goes on sale. Maybe that. When you say, I only have 190,000 of these games. That's it. They're $1 each. I only have 190,000. Or they're $10 each. And I only have, 19,000 games? I only have 19,000 games. That's it. After that, they're gone. The game goes away. Well, guess what? That would could actually drive people to buy your game, and you might make more money on the game than you would have otherwise. And you could do that, have that be released every year where you have, you tweak it a little bit and you release a new version, like the 2024 version, 2025 version. And again, 19,000, 18,000 copies, whatever it's going to be to work out to be under the threshold. And you can make that game that system work for you. Or you could go to Game Pass. Unity has said that the developer would not be on the hook for the installations from Game Pass. Now, I think it'd be quite hilarious for Unity to go to Microsoft and say, pay us 20 cents per installation. I think the Microsoft lawyers would have a field day with that. So good luck making that work. But you could do that. You could put it in Game Pass. You could create separate demos for your full game. You can make that work. So you could have a demo that's one chapter of your game, and then you could say, hey, click here to buy the full game. It goes to your website and buys a separate installation game, which means that you're not paying for demo installations. You're only paying for the purchased ones. And if the purchased one is $10 or more, then it probably doesn't matter how many times that game is installed because you still made enough money over the potential fees from Unity. So that can work too. And then if you're like, you know what? No, Unity has blown this. I have to move on. And by the way, I would encourage you, take some time with any big decision. You should take some time to think about it. Cool off for a little bit. Go for a walk. Go for a swim. Go talk to your friends. Go have fun. Take some time. Don't just make a rash decision. But if you say, you know what, I need to move, then I encourage you, look before you leap. When you say, you know what, I'm done with Unity, I'm not going to do Unity, Unity is done for me, it's over, I need to move on, don't just pick the hot thing and jump into it. Take time to fully evaluate your options. For example, Godot has been the kind of the darling of this whole situation because they're an alternate engine that is free, that has no licensing fees, that's open source, that has come a long way and is, quite frankly, a pretty powerful game engine. And by the way, it also can use C#. Now they have the GD script. They can do, I believe, C++ and some other languages as well, but you can use C# with it. Okay, great. So it sounds like Godot is a one-to-one replacement for Unity, correct? No, it's not. And Godot is not quite ready yet for a lot of situations. For example, they don't yet have the ability to publish to a console game. Well, that's kind of problematic if you're a console game developer. So now they're working on it. It's on the roadmap and they're working towards it. But that's something that might be a roadblock for you. Also, they don't have a monetization plan, or at least not a good one. It seems like they did right during a situation, but they kind of put it before the Unity announcement, so they didn't. It was a coincidence according to them. But they did say they were open for funding. So, you can donate money to their cause, and, their people have. But as we've seen with the rest of open source, donations don't necessarily work. They work short term, but, they tend to dry up over time. And your costs, your time, your effort is, doesn't get smaller, it gets more. So that's not a great monetization system. So if you've got a system that doesn't charge you anything and they need to monetize, how are they going to do that? And that's, a question mark right now. So that could be a problem. The other option you could go with is Unreal. Unreal is a very popular engine, and it powers a lot of AAA games as well as indie games, and you could make an Unreal game. So you could leap there, but that uses C++, not C#. And it's more complicated. It's a much harder learning curve. So, you get to think through, can I do this? And do I want to do this? Do I want to change how I think through this? And so I would encourage you, don't just leap. Don't just say, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. Another way you can leap is say, I'm going to create my own engine. I really don't like that option at all. That's like saying, I get charged for tires, so I'm going to build my own cars. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work and a lot of cost and a lot of expense, and it won't be as good as the engines that are probably already out there. So, that could work for some people, but it's another thing you need to think through before you just leap into it. So my thoughts are, don't panic. Unity itself hasn't changed. You can still make games in Unity. You can still work with the new rules. And if you need to look before you leap. So, what would it take for me to say, you know what, go back to Unity? Because right now I kind of find myself leaning towards, for a lot of people, I think the answer would be to not go to Unity. Now, again, not everybody. And if you're learning, it's still probably a good option. But, what would it take for me to say Unity's back to a good situation? Well, I think it would require removal of a lot of their leadership and rolling back all these changes. And I don't see that happening. We'll see what they say in a couple of days. And again, we're not going to panic. We're going to think this through, take some time, and make wise choices. And that leads us to my upcoming content, because the question's probably going to come up. What about the Game Development Master Course? You see, back in August, I released a pre-order for a master course that I have been working on and am working on that is scheduled to launch in the first part of next year. And so I allowed people to jump in early and get pre-access to this game development master course. And it's going to be built upon Unity, because Unity works well with C#. And so if you're already a C# developer, it's a great game engine to learn with. And if you aren't familiar with C#, well, I can teach you the C# and get you up to speed, and then get you up to speed in game development, where you can also have skills that can transfer into the business realm, not just game development. And so it's a great marriage of gaming and C#, and it can be really powerful. But it's based upon Unity. And there's more to it than just saying, well, you know what? It is a great learning tool, because it really is. And even if this Unity situation goes out of control, they don't roll anything back, and they just say tough. You know what? You can learn game development with Unity. You can learn to be a game developer and make money doing it with Unity. And you can avoid all of these fees and still learn a lot, and then transfer that knowledge to another engine. And even make your name building certain games with Unity. So you could also then learn C# kind of a fun way by learning game development, and take that C# knowledge and go into the business world and build, web applications or desktop applications or mobile applications, or, back end, front end, full stack, whatever you want to do, not just in game development. So you can still do that with Unity. And so even if a situation doesn't change at all, there's still a valid and valuable path to learning game development with Unity. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to take our own advice. We're not panicking. We're not going to panic. We're evaluating the situation, and we're going to do what's best for those in the course and for those who might consider it. For now, nothing has changed. I have had discussions in Discord with those that are in the course to get their feedback and their questions, and some of the things I addressed in this video were based upon their questions and concerns. We're going to talk to them. We're going to figure out what's the right choice to do going forward, and no matter what, I'm going to take care of my people. I'm going to take care of the people who were invested in this course, and people who wanted to invest in this course. I'm going to figure out how to make the best out of this, and we're going to figure out how to move forward. That there's a lot of different options you could do, but you know what? We're not going to make a decision yet. I want to see how the situation shakes out so I can make the best long-term decision, because just like a game developer, I have to think about not just today, not just tomorrow, but the long-term, years ahead process of working with and in Unity with my students, and even recommending Unity and putting content on YouTube around Unity. And you know what? I am not going to put any Unity tutorials on YouTube in the next week, because I'm going to kind of, not panic, but also not just say, hey, life is good. So I'm going to, kind of evaluate that and figure out where do you need to be. So we're not going to panic. We're not going to make a knee-jerk reaction. We're not going to get our pitchforks out. We're not going to, do anything rash. We're going to make a wise decision and take our time doing it. And again, no matter what, we're going to take care of people. That's what we believe in. So that's what is going on with the Game Development Master Course, and that's what's going on with Unity. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments, but here's the deal. I know we're angry, we're frustrated, we're irritated, we think this is horrible. Let's make this a constructive conversation. If it's just about, being angry and yelling and screaming, I'll probably delete the comments. Because quite frankly, that's not what we're about here. We're not about just being miserable towards people. And quite frankly, the majority of the people at Unity were opposed to this and didn't like the situation either. So don't start yelling at them. So let's have a positive, constructive conversation about wisdom and about how to make wise choices and what the announcements mean and what your thoughts are about game development of Unity. Because again, you can still learn Unity and have success doing it, and you can build games that maybe are just for you or just for free, for fun. And you know what? You can do that with Unity still. So what are you going to do? And what are your thoughts on the situation, and what questions didn't I answer that you would like to know more about? There's a lot of rumors out there that aren't true. There's a lot of things taken out of context or misunderstandings that have happened that, I'd love to clear up. If you hear something that you're like, I thought this happened, it might not have, or it might not be quite the way it's been portrayed, depending on who said it. Because if Unity said it, they probably try to paint themselves in the best light. And if a person who is extremely angry said it, well, maybe they didn't take into account all the good of the situation, just the bad. So let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll probably make a follow-up video at some point as we make more of a decision with the Game Development Master Course, and also a decision about more content on this channel for Unity. All right. So thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.